started with the county, and some of you may remember that, hopefully, all that discussion that we had back in that day. But we talked about what if. Emergency preparedness is the concept of what if. And you think about this here, I mean, there's all kinds of contingencies we plan for in life. We buy life insurance because of what if, right? And car insurance because of what if. So emergency preparedness is not a lot different. We just need to look at the world around us and understand what the potential that we might have as we exist. We had a little fun round of some flooding last year, and we're still dealing with the paperwork on that one. So those are the things that we look at. And what's the big one we're waiting for here in Utah? What's the big one? The earthquake, right? Okay, now actually, we'll see here in a minute on our spectrum, there's actually worse things can happen even on an earthquake, right? And in this fun, we get to think about all the bad things that could happen. But as we looked at this here last time, you may remember, in our world of emergency management, we type things. We have personal type emergencies on one end from, a scraped knee clear on up to a type 1 disaster, life extinction event, an asteroid takes us all out, right? No zombies, there's no zombie apocalypse in our scenarios though. There's nothing that FEMA's preparing for on that one. But we can look at all the potentials that we may face there, and you might be able to identify some other things. I mean, there's individual family circumstances that could be one of these things that creates a challenge for us, and we should build contingencies in our lives for being able to deal with this. Now, obviously, as an emergency manager, we're looking at a lot of times those big things that's going to impact our communities and the disasters and things that we deal with. And so down on that lower end, the type 5, type 4 incidents, which is what we dealt with a year ago with our flooding, the wildfires that Corey gets to deal with out there, they fit along this typing spectrum depending upon how big they get and how long they go. And that certainly extends the amount of resources that need to be brought in to handle those. But what are the impacts? Now, if Corey's dealing with something way out in the West Desert, not a lot of impact unless you happen to have a farm right in the way, right? But what about urban interface fires? Are those a possibility? We had one last year run right up around Willard there, and that makes you kind of nervous for a little bit because of the potential. Do we have a potential for an urban interface fire here in Brigham City? Sure, we're living along the edge of these mountains here. Anywhere in any of these towns through here potentially could have these kinds of problems. And obviously we've seen in the last year, beyond our little flooding event, the impacts of things like the hurricanes. That's one thing that's not on our list here, fortunately. But what about the wildfires in California? Isn't that horrific? It's hard to fathom those fires running through communities like that. Now, we don't have quite the overgrowth and the trees and the heavy brush that they do in those places. But Corey, is it a possibility in a heavy wind-driven event that even a downtown somewhere here in the county could have a fire blowing through town, right?
Yes, it could.
Okay.
South Willard has a lot of potential, especially on the east bank over there. We could have them right there on the hills of Brigham City. But yeah, big wind-driven fire we could get anywhere. We witnessed one in Mount Weaver Canyon last year, and it was all totally wind-driven and destroying homes and structures, and that can happen anywhere.
Yeah. When we think about that, hey, we get our nice green grasses and our trees and all that stuff, but you get wind heavy enough behind these fires, and that stuff will start jumping. It'll move with wood piles to sheds to whatever else to catch fire. I was in San Bernardino doing an ICS class one year, and they had one of those Santa Ana winds come down there, and right through downtown San Bernardino, we had a river of fire that blew down through there. So it's one of those things. We need to just kind of realize that we really truly aren't exempt. That's one thing about Utah that's kind of interesting, and in the Rocky Mountain areas in general, is that we're not like the eastern coast or the central part of the state that deals with tornadoes all the time, or like California that deals with those big massive urban interface fires. We're fairly fortunate. But the fact of the matter is really things can happen. So part of that is just being prepared for some of those things. And we spent a bit of time before we hit this slide in that last discussion. We talked about, where we could go to get information and stuff. And we're going to revisit that a little bit here. But we had a discussion about why. Why is it important for us in this room to be maybe more prepared than the average person? Any ideas? Okay, we don't know when or where it's going to happen. Corey?
In smaller communities, we seem to get isolated quite a bit more. We're going to be lower priority on the resources for large scale than that.
Okay.
So if we're not prepared to take care of ourselves, then it may be a while before we get that needed help.
Absolutely. Corey indicates that we're on our own in a lot of the rural parts of the country sometimes, and it's going to take longer to get resources there. Another reason why we should be prepared. But why should people in this room be more prepared than the average? Bingo. We're county employees, okay? We are the cavalry. Who do people look to and require and expect to show up to help them out? We have a concept called continuity of government, and it's one of several plans that are sitting on my desk that are in the process of being built. Continuity of government is the concept of the ability of government to be able to function during and after a disaster, okay? Down these lower end of the spectrum that we looked at, probably not as big of a deal, but you have a full devastating impact of something. We get that earthquake, and all of a sudden we've got a lot of infrastructure, personal and private infrastructure damaged. I live in a house that was built in 1893 out of adobe bricks, okay? Y'all may be on your own if this happens in the middle of the night, because I may be under a pile. You have to come and dig for me, right? So that's the reality of where we're at. So when we talk about the ability for government to respond, whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Right there. The first thing that we got to consider as far as government is the people, because all the rest of it doesn't matter. You can have all the fabulous resources in the world, in facilities, in fire trucks, police cars, and everything else, but if you don't have any people to man them, or to man the administrative and support elements that need to happen, okay? That's huge. So that's one of those things that we've just got to be ready to and able to respond as quick as we can. Now, obviously, a disaster is going to happen. First thing I'm going to be doing is, okay, I'm okay. And then I'll be checking my family to make sure my family's okay and set. And they're going to have to be in a position that I'm going to feel fairly comfortable that I can leave them before I'm going to come to work, right? I mean, that's just the hierarchy of our priorities, and I'm no different than anybody else, right? So we need to have those plans and things that we're going to talk about. Obviously, part of ours is the county resources, the status of what our organizations are look like, again, staffing, but what is the circumstances with our buildings and our county infrastructure. When you look at the case history out of Katrina, New Orleans was such a huge disaster on so many levels, and one of the challenges is that there was a significant number of government employees didn't show up to work because they were so heavily impacted. And the second thing is the amount of government facilities and patrol cars and fire trucks and fire stations that were just flat out inundated. Okay, so it just brought that whole city to its knees. What does that cost us? Not dollar-wise. We get hit that hard to where we have no capability or very limited capability of responding at a local level. What does that equate to? Time. Eventually the cavalry is going to come, but we're talking days or weeks sometimes, depending upon how widespread something is. So it goes back to that ability for us to be able to help kind of take care of ourselves. But we look at that infrastructure there. There's other things that we need to make sure that's all up and running, and our communications, that's huge. If we lose communications, that puts us back to the Stone Age. We're back to runners. We're back to people having to carry messages. And that's certainly would slow us down. And then we've lumped all the rest of this other stuff, infrastructure. This is all part of being able to respond, and what the difference that it makes between getting on top of things very quickly and taking sometimes days to be able to get our feet back under us. But you look into those roads and bridges. You got highways broken up and bridges down. Everything else is going to come to a quick standstill as well. Now, one of our plans here in the county is that we've identified the fairgrounds, Brigham City Airport, is probably two of the first places in our scenario that if we can get resources, say we get hit hard and maybe it's not even us, maybe it's Weber County, it's Salt Lake County, but the damaged infrastructure starts here close, we will have to be able to set up here in the county a base for resources to round up, to circle the wagons, and then begin airlift operations into impacted areas, you know? So those are part of those plans that we look at as we consider infrastructure. So there's huge discussions we can have about those particular concepts. So it brings us back to this thing, how is your planning? You know, where are you at? That we have some of the simple, right there, the simple fire plan. You know, our kids go to school every year, they should come back, and we should be able to do a fire drill in our house at the most basic level to help our kids be able to get out the doors and windows and then know where to meet up in the house for accountability. That's the very first step. But beyond that, we need to look at those other plans. What are we going to do, you know, to evacuate in the case of emergency? You got to stop, drop, hold, and then get out. Those are things that we can work with our families on. Another plan we need to look at is our communications plans within our family. That's going to be different from one family to the next. What is your dynamics? If you've got a family and you've got little kids, or maybe you got kids in 3 of the different schools in town, mom works, dad works, maybe in the county, out of the county, whatever, those all change the dynamics of what happens if that disaster occurs. How are you going to be able to communicate, and how are you going to be able to reunify your family? Some of that could take some time. So talking about these things in advance. If your kids go to school, know what those school disaster plans are going to look like. What are those requirements going to be for you to be able to get your kids back out of school? And is there alternates that you've given permission that could pick up your kids on your behalf, and vice versa? Maybe you can work out some things with some neighbors and so forth. So those are part of those plans we need to look at. Now I've got a document here. We'll leave here on the table. You can pick up as you see fit. But this is called a critical employee emergency planning. And it's a very simple document. Kind of has you take an assessment of you know, your situation and your status. Are you a single parent or are you married? You know, are you a primary caregiver to somebody who's maybe has some special needs? That's good to know. And additional information, contact information. What is your plan in the event that your house is not inhabitable? What would your plan B be? Or plan C? What would those things look like? So at the very minimum, you want to have these plans and look at some of these things for your own personal use. Now, we can't ask this officially as a county for you to provide this information to the county. We can't mandate it, but we could certainly ask that as a county employee, if you had the interest and ability, willingness to not only fill this out for your information, but make a copy and give it to us. And I talked to Jenica that we could retain this in your personal file at HR. And the idea is in the event of a disaster, if we're trying to get accountability, because that's one of those things that HR is going to be doing on disaster day, as we look at trying to get a roll call of employees and what is the status of employees and who has the ability to respond and who doesn't. It's contact information and it's circumstances, and it's kind of what is your best guess of what your plan, where could we find you, and so forth in being able to do that. So it's not mandatory, but it's one of those things I would ask that if you'd be willing to look at this and fill out what information you'd give us so that we can put this in your file and help be able to communicate with you on disaster day. Also with this here is just a go kit, a supply checklist, and it's one of the other many resources that we've got that you can look at. In fact, on the table here I've got other literature that'll help you with some of those things. And we're going to talk about some of the websites and other sources of information when we start talking about this planning. Does it make sense that we'd want to do this planning? It's not always easy. Life is busy, right? We've got 1,000 things to do, and we have to play the what-if game. But it's one of those things, if you can find that time in your life to do this planning with your family and get it written down. and make sure that people know it. Now, one of the things on the communications plan, you look at this here, I've got this out-of-state point of contact, and I may have mentioned it in the last discussion, but it's important. If we have a disaster and the phone systems are taken down, or landline phone systems, there's a prioritization to bring long-distance service back online before we worry about local service. Why would you think that would be? Any idea? What's that? Yeah, that's how you get the whole of the cavalry, is to try to bring in, you know, the folks from out of state. So those long distance of lines are going to be critical. We can use that to our benefit. Find Aunt Mabel or Uncle Fred, who live in another state, and make them part of your plan and help them understand that if we have this earthquake here in Utah, every family member is going to have your number, and we may not be able to reach each other within the state, but if anybody get to a phone, we're going to call you, and we're going to check in, and you're going to kind of keep a running list of who we've heard from and where they're at and what their situation is going to be, and we can be able to communicate and check on each other and figure out what's the status of the rest of your family. So those are some things to look at. Okay, and again, this here is just, you know, the bottom bullet there is the plans of when you have to report to work. That's the added piece that we as county employees have to take in here. And that is, what level of stability is your plan to try to get your family to so that you can leave them, that you can be able to come to work. There's some contingencies that are floating out there that we've been looking at. I know at the sheriff's office there's some things that we've talked about being able to do, that if we needed to bring family members in to the facility for a period of time until things can get established. I know talking with Bill Gilson and his guys out at the road shed, you know, they've got some concepts. They could bring in some camp trailers and stuff and park them sometimes in those sheds, especially in the wintertime if it's really cold. But they could bring in trailers and stuff to be able to house families. They could tie into the generators and things that are out there. So just some thoughts and ideas, and it's one of those things that we might, you know, all kind of put our thinking caps on as to what that could potentially look like as we try to help each other and take care of our families. How about the emergency kits? We talk about this. Make a plan, build a kit, be prepared, right? So the different kits that we're looking at, again, that evacuation kit in case you have to leave your house. You got a hazmat spill, and we got methyl ethyl death blowing into town, and you don't have time to do anything but grab your kit and go. Whether it's a bucket, whether it's a suitcase, whether it's a backpack, you've got some basic food, basic supplies, medications, toys for the kids, whatever, and we can jump and go. Car kits. You know, if you've got a spouse that travels, or if you're traveling distances from home, you know, that you've got some supplies in the trunk of your car in the event of a problem. I know before I come to work for the county, I was working in Salt Lake, and I had a pretty robust kit in my car, and it changed between summer and winter because of the needs. But I was always kind of worried, if I'm working in Salt Lake and the big one happens, I may not be able to drive from West Valley back to Brigham City. I might have to backpack. So I had a backpack in the back of that car with some food and water and hiking shoes and the things that I needed to do. Okay. How about just food storage and water storage? Okay. Call that food insurance. You know, that kind of resource is not only for just disasters, but what happens if you have an injury and somebody in your family can't work. And you know, I mean, I know I've had an opportunity in my life to have to dive into the food storage once or twice to be able to extend the family budget, you know, not run to the store every day. Look at things like your alternate cooking and heating, alternate shelter, you know, some of the camping equipment we use. Think about that and how we could, if our house was uninhabitable and if we needed to take and bring some other resources in. And again, there's a lot of information out there. You can go clear to the whole world of prepping, you know, become a prepper and zombie apocalypse. I don't necessarily, suggest we go that far. We are going to have our Preparedness Expo. I've got some flyers for this here on May 11th and 12th at the fairgrounds. We did this about a year and a half ago. if you had a chance to go, you probably hopefully enjoyed that. It's going to be bigger and better this year. We got more vendors, more organized on our classes through both of those days. A lot of information on preparedness, a lot of static displays and so forth that'll be there, that'll help us be able to look at some of these things. So this just kind of shows you some of that information there. We got this literature. The Box Elder County website, just our homepage on that emergency preparedness portion of that. If you don't mind, I'll click to that. I've got some links, and I want to show you one or two of these that are something that you can use as you talk to your family. Okay, there. Okay, so under emergency management, with emergency preparedness, and again, I've got a lot of links to some of the resources down here. There's a lot of the Be Ready stuff. Be Ready Utah, Be Ready America. There's some FEMA, Red Cross, a lot of information there. But this is kind of an interesting series of little short videos. I'm going to go ahead and play one for you. This was done between KBYU and Salt Lake City Emergency Management. And it's just, you can come to see down through here. They're just all kinds of little short videos. What's that? Oh. Well, what happened with that? Well, I appreciate you at least letting me know that much. Oh man, this is where it gets into an IT thing, and man, I am fine. Oh, I see what's happening. I got like about 3 windows opened up here. Something's happening. There we go. All right. All right, let's just do this here. Here's an away from home kit we can learn about.
A busy dad who's concerned about getting his family prepared for a disaster. And here's Jeff, a public safety official who's an expert on getting ready for the unexpected. Together, they'll find ways to prepare that don't take a lot of time.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Kurt. How you doing?
Well, thanks.
Good. You know, I stand here thinking, have you realized how much time we spend away from home?
Actually, I can spend weeks at a time traveling.
Well, all I know is even when I'm home, it seems like all my waking hours are away from home.
So, Jeff, why would I need an emergency bag with me while I'm commuting?
It's going to help you if a disaster happens. First, if you got to walk home, you're going to want something better than your dress shoes to get home in. So get yourself a pair of comfortable shoes and bring them with you while you're commuting.
Makes perfect sense.
Always have a little water so you can keep hydrated. I like to have a few snacks with me. I'm always hungry. Yeah. And again, a space blanket. That'll help keep you warm if you don't have enough clothing with you and you can't haul enough clothing. And for the car, we need a few extras. It's really important, particularly in these cold weather times, that you have a good parka. You have some good waterproof shoes that'll keep your feet warm. These are a pair of pants, and this is a jacket. They're windproof and waterproof. Some good gloves and a good hat to keep you warm. Also, Kurt, keep yourself a pair of jumper cables in your car. Ice scraper to clean your window, and I like to have a little more of a substantial first aid kit. I keep a shovel so that I can dig out, my 72-hour kit, a sleeping bag in case I have to sleep out, right?
Yeah.
And some kitty litter.
Now tell me why you would need kitty litter in your kit.
If you get stuck, you can throw that kitty litter out underneath your car, and between that and your shovel, you might be able to get yourself out of a jam if you get yourself stuck in some of this snow and ice.
This is all great stuff, Jeff. Thanks. We got a lot to prepare for. Do we have anything else?
Yeah, we're going to go inside and take a look at some stuff.
Great idea.
One of the key things that you need to have in your kit is a little AM/FM radio. You want to have a small amount of cash. Have your community contact information, your family contact, doctors, law enforcement, all of those key numbers, insurance papers. Have a copy of that. Extra batteries if you can fit them in your pack. Food and water are staples, obviously, for any kind of an emergency. Some ponchos or something that can repel water around that, you can keep yourself dry.
We spend so much time away from home. It's important to prepare for an emergency should you be in your office, school, or car. So take 20 minutes to buy the items you might need should an emergency arise. And if you want, you can buy pre-made kits from an emergency supply retailer. We'll see you next time.
Visit kbyutv.org to get your free 20 to Ready emergency preparedness guide.
And again, there's just numerous of these little videos that are prepared on just a variety of topics on preparedness, and they're only anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes maybe, and it's a great opportunity. We're going to sit down with your family and take 1 or 2 of these, and the concept is you take 20 minutes at a shot, and you look at these principles to kind of get them going in your family. So it's a resource for you to look at. Our County Emergency Management Facebook page. If you're not following that there's little tips that we throw on there quite a bit. Now, first off is Code Red. Has everybody signed up for Code Red? Does anybody not know what Code Red is? Okay. Code Red is our reverse 911 for the county. And everybody's landline is automatically included in that. What's not included is your cell phone. You have to go in and specifically sign your cell phone up to receive Code Red messages. So if you've got it done, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, make sure all your family members have that information. It was a huge tool for us during the flooding. I used it 4 different times last year between snow loads and flooding and other issues that were going on, that it was able to be used as a significant tool. So that's right there on the front of that page. But then farther down, you'll see that I've got, this is my main page, but down here we've got information about, there you go, there's a note about using a fire extinguisher. Some of the Be Ready messages. There's an advertisement about a CERT class that's going to be starting here in Brigham City. So we throw that out there. There was a look back at our flooding event. And then there's some other information about food storage and things like that. So I try to keep things up there, little tidbits that I'm come across that I can throw up there as well. So anyway, just some of the resources, I guess, that we can look at online. I want to go back to, okay, that's right where we were at. Is it thinking? There we go. Man, it's slower than I am. That's odd. Okay, so that's the various resources we can look at. Code Red, we talked about that. So let's talk about county disaster day duties. I mean, this is where we're going to kind of talk a little bit about where we're going. Every other month, we've started we've taken the department head elected officials meeting that was occurring, and we've taken over one of 2 emergency management committee meetings. The emergency management committee was a monthly meeting that we had where we had some department heads and so forth, but we had a lot of outside partners of ours, cities and towns and Red Cross and different things. And for years, it's historically been just a great opportunity for information sharing and being able to rub elbows and work with each other, coordinate. And we didn't want that to go away, but what we did was every other month we have excused the non-county leadership, and we have re-invited all county leadership to attend these meetings. And so this is going to be an ongoing thing, and we are now working on the county plan. What is our county plan? We've had one for a lot of years, but we now have the ability, we're going to go into the frog's hair detail as to who's going to be doing what. So right now, you can see on that top list, we've already got, by the nature of the departments, we got departments that automatically know what their job is on disaster day, right? Sheriff's office, we just go from one to another, not a big problem. Corey's world, it goes from day-to-day fire marshal stuff to disaster. That's not a big problem. The road department, now Bill and his guys, they learned that transition a little bit more this last year, and probably would be able to do that better. Gina and her folks out at the landfill in debris management have a very defined role. So they're kind of already there. We've taken certain departments within the county and are lumped into what we call the policy and administrative duties. And so that's like the commissioner's office, the county attorney, our IT folks, the auditor, human resources, Mitch, who runs our public information, and our fairgrounds folks. Those are going to be administrative. And fairgrounds is kind of unique only because we're going to leave them kind of as a standalone entity, because the fairgrounds gives us, it's kind of like our multi-tool. You know, there's so much flexibility with the fairgrounds and what they can do on disaster day. In our flooding, we not only used them for sandbagging, but they were also the place that we used for our spontaneous volunteer management. Now think about this. If everybody in the world was part of a volunteer organization, it was already organized, and they knew what they were supposed to do, and we knew who they were and all that stuff, and they showed up on disaster day, we'd be so organized. Holy cats, it'd be crazy to be able to work that way. But we don't. People are busy. But people have big hearts on disaster day, and guess what? We have volunteers come out of the woodwork, and it creates a challenge for us, because spontaneous volunteers, you don't know how many you're getting, when they're going to be here, what their capabilities are, if we got any bad guys in the middle of the thing. And so we have to all of a sudden build the capability of managing those spontaneous volunteers, and that was become a big piece for us during our flooding events. We had people coming from Davis and Salt Lake counties to help out. And we also heard that we had a group that was up wandering around that ended up nothing we could ever find that they were doing, but there was indications that they were up scoping out to take advantage of some situations. So anyway, I just kind of hit with the fairgrounds. There's just a lot of things that they can do for us. So they're kind of our pocket knife. Right now, we've been working with the assessor's office, buildings and grounds, our victim advocates folks over in the county attorney's office, and the bookmobile folks have already got some defined roles, and we'll touch on them in just a few minutes. That leaves the remaining departments that we're still working on. Because the idea is if we have the disaster, our day-to-day business stuff is going to kind of shut down temporarily. We're not going to be selling license plates on disaster day, okay, if it's big enough. Now on that spectrum we talked about, like our flooding, it didn't totally impact us, it didn't totally take us offline, but we get a big enough disaster, everybody's going to have another job. Everybody's going to have a disaster day hat, and we're going to talk about what that may look like. Now I just punched it twice, and it's probably going to move twice, right? Oh, there we go. Okay, so here is, let's see, we jumped. Nope. All right, so here's one of our set of needs. So just kind of give you an idea, and if you find that you've got yourself an interest in one of these areas, talk about it within your office. And as we get together with the leadership, we can come online. So right now, for spontaneous volunteer management, and it's just initial. I mean, we've got the capability of putting more people there, but right now, Julie Jacobson and her folks in the victim advocate's office are going to take that piece for us. So if we have to set up a volunteer management shelter, they're going to be trained to be able to do that. Now we've got some CERT people here in the county that, because of the flooding, we was able to get them trained as well. So we've got some staffing that can assist with that. Donations management You know, they always talk about donations as the second disaster in a disaster. And I've actually got a point on my Facebook page. It's amazing in disasters how much stuff gets shipped to victims. Prom dresses, parkas to the people in Florida, you know, rubber galoshes. People take an opportunity out of the generosity of their heart to clean out their closets and send stuff. And in a lot of these disasters, there's sometimes a mountain of debris that ends up going to a landfill. So donations management is critical. You've got to have that ability to manage those, separate out the stuff, and organize the stuff that can be utilized. Some of you may have heard with that hurricane in Texas that KSL did a big fundraiser. They gathered $1 million worth of money. They bought semi-loads of plywood and lumber and stuff that they figured would be needed down in that hurricane area down there. And that truck those shipments got stopped at the Texas border. There was an order by the Texas governor to stop all the donations because they were being buried with stuff. And they were so overwhelmed trying to sift through the dross that they just said they stopped everything, you know. And so the idea of donations management is send some money. We can use that a lot easier and quicker, buy stuff in the local economy and kind of kickstart that rather than just have semi-loads of stuff. They did a pricing of a can of beans one time that would cost you, 99 cents in the grocery store. And by the time you take that and you ship it and transport it and it gets picked up and moved and sorted and distributed, that 99-cent a can of beans is worth now $3.39. You know, it just economically doesn't make sense to try to send in those kinds of things. So bookmobile folks, we figured those guys, they know how to catalog stuff and where to find it after they've got it, right? So we figured they would be, and with their mobile capabilities of their vehicles, we could actually utilize donations management in various places in the county depending upon the circumstances. Debris management, again, that's huge, and Gina and her folks are going to be receiving training to be able to do that. Now that leaves the remaining 4 functions here that we are going to be looking at developing. Our mass shelter management. And now, the emergency managers in the county, we've all had this discussion. It is absolutely ridiculous for Brigham City to come up with their plan and the county to come up with their plan and Tremont and Garland each to come up with their own plan. We're all working together because when we get to the point in time that these types of things are kicking into effect, it's a y'all come. We're all going to be involved in this situation together. So there'll be individuals from each of these other jurisdictions that are going to take on some of these duties as well. So we become part of a collaborative team. We can back each other up. And in many cases, we have to think that we have to go 3 deep in people that are trained for these various positions because you have to look at the rotation through what they call operational periods. We may be going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a period of time. And so we need to not just have one person or one shift to be able to do this, but we need many. Shelter management, right now, one of our biggest partners is the school district, and we got to gently drag them along a little bit farther. There's some changes that are going on in the district right now. But there's only 8 facilities in the county, and they're all school district facilities that meet a FEMA required threshold for a shelter. And that is you have to have the ability to have showers and restrooms and the ability to feed people and so forth. And so there's only 8 facilities. That's the 2 high schools, the 2 natatoriums, the 2 middle schools, and the 2 intermediate schools in the county. So between Brigham and Tremont. So we'll need people along with county or along with school district personnel that will be trained to set up a shelter. And we're going to do this independent of the Red Cross, because right now the Red Cross, we don't have a lot of people. There's nobody in Box Elder County, and depending upon the nature of the disaster and where it's at, it may be a while before we get any Red Cross help. So we're not going to wait for them. So we're going to staff this ourselves. Another category is special needs management. There's what we call a special needs registry that's been developed, and that's only for people who voluntarily put themselves on it, but it's people who live on oxygen or other type of support systems. people who are immobile, that may be in wheelchairs and things like that. As an emergency manager, that's a special community that we have to somehow be able to deal with. And so we're looking at people that we can send to training that'll be part of a special needs management team that can help us as we look at these type of folks in an emergency. And that could reach on out to even things like daycare centers and things like this in the middle of the daytime. Mass casualty management, that's a little bit more touchy. It's probably going to fall more within the realm of our EMS folks. But the fact of the matter is we've only got, 12 ambulances, 10 ambulances in the county. And so if we have a situation where we have mass casualty, we will need some coordination with some of that stuff as well. So we'll be looking at what we can do with that from folks within some of our offices. Another one that's a big one in today's world, and that's pet management. We got people that won't go into a shelter in some cases unless Fido or Fifi the cat is taken care of. So we have to build some bandwidth in being able to provide some capabilities there. And so we're going to be looking at people who like pets and livestock and be willing to help us with that. One of the things we've been discussing out of the sheriff's office is using the sheriff's posse to be able to help with some of this stuff, to manage not only livestock, but we've even got the fairgrounds, again, with that small animal barn and things like that. We have the capability. We probably will bring in and partner with veterinarians here in the county, and Tartar Gate and Tractor Supply and IFA, so we're looking at a lot of these different things to be able to fill these positions. And again, some of you folks within our county departments may be helping us with this. Down at the EOC, there's a series of positions we'll be using to staff that emergency operations center. We'll need folks to help staff a call center, to receive incoming phone calls, and then to be able to transfer those calls out to the various groups that may be active within the EOC. Now this is everything that we would do, and it depends on the disaster as to which one of these bullets you actually have opened up. But we'll have a public information function, and Mitch, we mentioned that up with the county policy level folks. There's also a public information need out at the disaster scenes in some cases, so it becomes a bigger piece to work with public information. Situational awareness and documentation. These are going to be folks that will be keeping in touch with what's happening out on the ground in the various areas that may have a disaster, so that we can keep an accurate tracking of what's going on and keep that stuff documented. So there'll be individuals associated with that. Logistics, managing the facility there at the EOC, IT support, supplies, meals. That may be sheriff's staff that'll probably take care of a lot of that. But then we have this ESF. These are emergency support function groups. And this is based upon a standardized system that the state uses and the federal government uses, so that when we're talking apples to apples, oranges to oranges, all the way up through the line here. But I've had to divide these out because we don't have the staffing here within the county to put individuals on each one of these emergency support functions. So support function 1, 3, and 12, and if I'm in the EOC, I could show you a poster that breaks these down here, but 1 is transportation, 3 is public work, public utilities. So Bill and his guys, there's 3 of those that are probably more in their world. Corey's office, he has the most. I mean, you got fire, hazmat, EMS, and rescue, search and rescue, okay? So we'll have a desk that'll support those responses that are happening out in the field. And the concept of the EOC is that we become the backfield support. We obtain resources for the folks that are out in the field. By the time we get to the point of standing this facility up, dispatch's Rolodex is done. We've used all the resources in the county, and we can't put all of the resources in the county in the fray of a disaster anyway, because guess what? We still have day-to-day things that we need to take care of, right? Police, fire, EMS are still going to be having those day-to-day calls even in the middle of a disaster. So in time, we will work to staff all of these other emergency support functions that are out there. And those are just kind of some of my concepts of who may be doing that for us. Anyway, just kind of showing you where we're going and to give you an idea so that as we work with the department heads and elected officials, that we can start staffing these and it'll make sense to everybody. Okay? So besides completing that plan and looking at those assignments we're discussing here, there'll be training that will go along with each one of those assignments we've talked about, and we'll coordinate with those other jurisdictions that'll have similar assignments so we become part of a more collaborative team. And then once that plan and all those positions are approved, we'll actually move into a series of tabletop and functional and even full-scale exercises over time where we can actually practice coming into these areas and being able to do some of the things that we've been talking about. Okay? And then we always have the ongoing encouragement for personal preparedness. Any comments, questions, or snide remarks about what we've covered today? Give you a picture of kind of what we're looking at and where we're going in our county emergency management plan. Hopefully we won't ever have to use it, but if we do, we're going to be ready, right? Unless there's any comments or questions, please step up and take some literature if you would, please, and appreciate you coming. Good. Thanks.